Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody. My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World, What's Happening. And welcome to our next stream in the series that we're doing on the alt-right. So, the subject for today is basically going to be stupid things that the alt-right believes. Right. Which we kind of got into this a little bit last week when we started talking about race and IQ, which is very much a central core sort of tenet of the alt-right. You know, it is essentially just rebranding white supremacism. That's really what the alt-right is with a, you know, new veneer on it. Lewis the Hedgehog, hey man, thank you for joining. So anyway, before we get going though, let's see where we're at with our piece here. Um, this is our Dueling Dragons thing that we started, that we drew on stream actually a while ago. And then I think we started to color it, and then we just sort of gave up or something. We never actually finished it, so we're going to start this again. Anyway, but I think it's coming along pretty good. We'll see if we can make this something, worth it. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump right into it because we got a lot to cover in today's stream. First thing we're going to start with some of the core sort of central beliefs of the alt-right. Uh, very big one is this idea of the great replacement theory, right? So what the main reason, like the one of the main reasons, I guess you would say, that if you were to talk to, say, Richard Spencer or something like that, and you were to ask him what is the alt-right all about, he would say to you, it is white people basically defending their culture and their heritage, is how he would put it, right? And that's something to remember is that, these people have this sort of, perpetual victim complex, right? Where they believe that they're under attack, like their very existence is threatened. And that's kind of a thing that you see a lot in fascist movements. Like fascist movements are simultaneously like always on the verge of extinction, always under a threat from, assault from all sides. And, they're just defending themselves. And they're also at the same time, like genetically and racially superior, right? And, it's their birthright or whatever to lord over all the the out group, right? And that's the thing that you get in just fascist movements in general. That's not unique to the alt right. You're always under attack, but also completely goddamn cars, also completely superior and have a God-given right to just dominate at the same time, right? So anyway, but part of this comes down to this notion of white genocide, which if you were to ask someone like Richard Spencer or Jared Taylor or, Lauren Southern, somebody like that, you would probably get, some bullshit about birth rates and, blah, 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 blah. That's essentially what the Great Replacement theory is. The Great Replacement theory is just a rebranding of the white genocide trope, right? And I know we've kind of covered this in other streams before, so I won't focus that much on white genocide specifically. Um, but it's the idea that the white race is being forcibly, destroyed through systematic multiculturalism. Forced multiculturalism basically is somehow destroying the white race, right? But anyway, so but the Great Replacement theory has kind of gotten a lot of traction recently. Tucker Carlson has spoken about it openly on his show. He's probably at this moment the biggest proponent of all of this stuff. Um, but it's been around for quite a while. It was the term Great Replacement was coined in 2012 by a French writer named Renaud Camus in his book called, appropriately enough, The Great Replacement. And this book, The Great Replacement, basically outlines the entire thing. The idea that white birth rates are going down, and that Western governments around the world are putting in policies that will result in immigrants and stuff, right, coming in, and then basically at a certain point in time, they're just essentially going to supplant the white race in these countries, right? White races will become the white people will become a minority, and then suddenly they'll just be gone, and then one day it'll trigger, and they'll just like gather them all up into like, cattle cars or whatever and ship them off to the concentration camps. As soon as the white people aren't the majority anymore, they're not in control of anything. Basically, it's a fear of it's a fear of demographic shifts is what it is. It's a reaction because there actually is you know real life some of this stuff actually is happening in real life. Black I mean sorry um like yeah, for example, like Latinos and black people, they're growing as part of the population in the United States, for example. In Europe it would be mainly like Middle Eastern immigrants, right? Middle Eastern and North African immigrants are growing as part of the population, right? Whereas you know, and that's what it is. It's fear of demographic shifts, right? But anyway, this book, The Great Replacement, was based on an earlier 1972 book called The Camp of the Saints, which was a novel by a guy named Jean Sipal. I don't know, I don't speak French. And it's basically just it's sort of a Turner Diaries esque kind of uh, you know fictional account of a race war where in this book, Camp of the Saints, Europe is invaded by immigrants from Asia, in particular India. Guy didn't really seem to like Indians. And there are scenes in the book where the people are described like vermin crawling up on the beaches, swarming like rats and stuff like that. And there's also a lot of very detailed, um, lots of very detailed descriptions of orgies and that kind of thing in the camp of the saints, where it becomes sort of borderline porn at a certain point. So yeah, very interesting stuff if you're a scholar of hate movements like myself. Um, Funny thing about this book is that it was a favorite of Trump advisor Stephen Miller. He would basically pass that around to everybody. Steve Bannon has also talked about the Camp of the Saints as well. So if anybody out there was on the fence and didn't really think that racism had much to do in formulating Donald Trump's domestic policy, just look at what the guys who created that policy are reading and passing around to their friends. Right. Stephen Miller, by the way, if you remember, as an example of such a racist policy, he was the architect of Trump's child separation policy for immigrants. Right. He did that on purpose as a way as a deterrent to try to keep immigrants from coming into the country. Let's take away their children. That was his brainchild. Because of Stephen Miller, there are something around 500 or so children who have just been permanently removed from their families. They can't find their families, and now these kids are like orphans thanks to Stephen Miller. So just remember, this shit has consequences. Um, so Lauren, like I said before, Lauren Southern was a very big proponent of the Great Replacement theory. She actually has done some right-wing, sort of alt-right racist activism in this regard. In 2017, she joined up with a group called Generation Identity. That's their name in English, at least. Um, which was a European, white nationalist group. And they went out on the Mediterranean in a boat and tried to stop a boat that was owned by some NGOs. The NGOs were a group called SOS Mediterranean, and then also partially owned by Doctors Without Borders. And this boat was going out to rescue people who had been stranded on the north shores of Africa on the Mediterranean, right? Basically, going out trying to find people who are shipwrecked and like save them from like drowning and dying of fucking thirst and shit like that, right? And because these are like refugees and migrants and things, and fucking that shit's dangerous, right? I mean, you get reports in the Mediterranean and stuff of like refugees trying to cross in boats and sinking and all that other shit. Lauren Southern got with these white supremacist douchebags, went out there and tried to stop these people from saving lives. So, something to keep in mind. The reason I bring that up is because Lauren Southern is trying to um, rebrand herself, right? She was a very, very prominent alt-right YouTuber person. And the reason why she was so prominent is because, let's face it, let's not bullshit ourselves, folks. It's because she's young and attractive. That's why. So it was a pretty face to put on the vile racism that, the alt-right beliefs there that are essentially just, one step up from fucking Nazism. Best way to present that is to get someone who's young and attractive, and then, all the horny guys click on the fucking video because they want to see Lauren Southern in a tight t-shirt or some shit like that. And before you know it, they're talking about the Jewish question. That's most definitely a tactic which we will be we're gonna we'll have a stream probably after this one. We'll talk about recruitment tactics and stuff like that. And I'm gonna go over that very heavily. Anyway, but she's trying to rebrand herself because Lauren Southern found out that white identitarian white nationalist, white separatist type people are also very highly misogynistic. And so she tried to get away with it because she was getting no respect. But if you look at Lauren Southern and her recent, videos and appearances and stuff like that, she's made no apologies for the highly racist, highly bigoted, and hateful content that she's pushed in the past. She sidesteps the question when people ask her, "Will you disavow all the shit that you used to say?" She won't answer it, and it's because she still believes it. She's just kind of trying to rebrand herself so that she can make more money, so that she can be taken seriously and not be blocked on social media and shit like that. So fuck Lauren Southern, right? Bitch deserves to be fucking like, kicked off the internet. Anyway, um, but what really brought the Great Replacement thing into the American political landscape was, of course, Charlottesville. If you remember, one of the big chants of all those guys holding their fucking dumbass tiki torches, running around in the middle of the night screaming, "Jews will not replace us." Right? Blood and soil. Jews will not replace us. Well, that's the Great Replacement theory right there. The theory that white people are being replaced by, governments that are controlled by, Jewish people, Jewish elites, that kind of thing. And it's some kind of nefarious conspiracy theory to eradicate the white race, right? Another guy who promoted this stuff, of course, was the shooter at the Christchurch shooting in New Zealand. His name was Brenton Harrison Tarrant. Brenton Harrison Tarrant, who wrote passionately about the Great Replacement theory in his manifesto that he published on 8chan, I think it was. I actually think he live streamed that massacre, which was, a whole new level of fucking depraved right there. What a piece of shit. Anyway, yeah, talked very much about that, in his manifesto. He, of course, shot 50 and killed 51 people and injured another 50 in two mosques in New Zealand. Another person who was a fan of the Great Replacement conspiracy theory was a guy named Patrick Wood Crusius, and he perpetuated a mass shooting at Walmart in Texas, El Paso, Texas, in 2019, where he killed 23 people and injured another 23 people. He also posted his manifesto to 8chan before the shooting. So the point is, the people who believe this shit are dangerous. And, when people talk about dangerous ideas, and stuff like that, it's like, this is one of those dangerous ideas, you know, um, where just right wing lunatics just fucking like get obsessed with this shit. And it seems to just drive them absolutely fucking bonkers. And before you know it, they're out in a fucking grocery store or at a church or something blowing people away and shit, you know, because they saw a fucking YouTube video about it. It's fucking disturbing as hell. Um, so that's why, we need to stand up and push back, fight against these types of, these ideas. You can't kill. That's the thing. You can't kill an idea, right? Ideas never die. They just mutate, right? They mutate, they grow, they change, and they keep coming back, especially bad ideas. Always come back. And the only way that you can defeat bad ideas is to have an alternative. So that's why you need to push back against it. When somebody goes on YouTube and types in great replacement theory, there should be 100 videos telling them, hey, this stuff is bullshit, it's dangerous, don't listen to it, right? That's how you fight back. That's how you win culture wars, is by using, I mean, there's various tactics and all that stuff, you know, but that's how you win culture wars, is by spreading good ideas, right? Um, Anyway, so what exactly is this shit? What exactly is the fucking great replacement, right? I mean, we touched on it a little bit. It's the idea that white birth rates are declining in Western nations, right? And the governments of Western nations um, have a hand in that. It's not just something that's happening. That's kind of core to it, is that it's the idea that it's being done on purpose, right? Now, the way that they do it, of course, varies depending on who you're talking to. Sometimes it has to do with pollution, all that stuff, right? Sometimes it has to do with some kind of, other nefarious means like putting, soybeans and stuff in the food supply, that kind of thing, turning the frogs gay, shit like that, right? Um, putting in chemicals in the water that promote, that cause low sperm counts, this kind of thing, right? And then also it also has a lot to do with they'll talk about wages, how people can't raise families because they're not paid enough, blah 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 blah. That's always linked in with immigrant labor, they took our jobs, that kind of thing. So they'll say, yeah, they're bringing in all these illegal immigrants and stuff like that so that they can pay them less and not hire white people because white people demand higher wages and that kind of shit, blah 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 blah, right? And so somehow it has to link back to the government. That's the sort of the core, one of the core tenets of the great replacement theory, is that it's not just something that's just happening naturally through just, societal changes. It has to be, it's a nefarious sort of plan put in place by Jewish overlords, right? Um, and the immigration part is also a core tenet as well. It's not just the fact that policies are put in place that are preventing white people from having children, or not promoting white people to have children, or straight up like making them sterile, shit like that. It's also the idea that the said governments are also bringing in non-white people from other countries, So in Europe, that mainly has to do with immigration from the Middle East. You have this refugee crisis that's been a thing there for quite a while now, since the frickin' Iraq War, right? That kind of thing, and ISIS and shit like that. And then you have, in the United States, that usually means immigration from south of the border, right? Um, and the idea is that, um, these immigrants have higher birth rates than the native white people that live in these countries, right? So as white people have less babies, then their, populations go down, and then the non-white people have all the kids, and a couple of decades pass before you know it, white people are the minorities in Western countries. And then some people will even take it a little farther and say, then they'll all kill the white people, blah, 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 blah. So it all depends. There's lots of variations on these things. There is, of course, not one, like all conspiracy theories, there's no definitive version of the conspiracy theory. you know Basically, the more radical, the more reactionary someone is, the more violent the conspiracy theory gets, until, so if you talk to somebody like Richard Spencer, for example, he'll just say, oh, it just means declining, demographic shifts and declining political power for white people. And then if you talk to like the more insane neo-Nazi types who want to go start their own country in the Pacific Northwest, they'll claim that it's like, a conspiracy by international Jewish communists or whatever to eventually gas all of the white people in the world and kill them all, because for some reason, it's always like white people have to be the arch enemy of Jewish people. I don't understand that shit. But whatever. Um, the thing is that conspiracy theories at their core, right, are a way to make sense of events. Okay, because there are, some aspects of what these people are saying are actually true, are actually happening. For example, birth rates of white people in the United States, for example, are not growing, right? They're basically stable. They're at net zero. So, and even in some places, they would even be below zero. That is to say that they're not having enough children to replace the current population. So the population may even be shrinking, right? That's something that's been happening for a long time. And it's not just happening in the United States either. It's happening in Japan. Japan's got a big problem with that, right? So, yeah, that's definitely true. Another thing that actually is happening in real life is lower sperm counts. That's definitely a thing that's affecting men in the United States as well, right? And there's lots of reasons for that. A lot of reasons have to do with, it has to do with pollution, has to do with really bad diets, it has to do with drug use, right? Lack of exercise, stuff like that, right? Where sperm counts are going down. Drug use is a big part of that too. People smoking marijuana, shit like that. That fucks up your sperm count, right? So these are all, some of these things are actual concerns. The low sperm count thing is actually a concern. Lower fertility rates in women are actually a concern, right? The thing is, there's no, the part where it becomes a conspiracy is the cause of all that. It's like, well, nobody's actually causing this shit. There's no like department in the government that's like the Department of Low Sperm Rates. That doesn't fucking exist, right? The Department of fucking Low Fertility Rates. That's not a thing. There's no secret underground fucking like cabal of evil scientists putting chemical inside the Twinkies and shit in order to like, make you sterile, right? Um, but that's what, so that's basically what conspiracy theories are. Conspiracy theories are essentially myths, modern day myths, right? Just the same way that in the past, people would attribute natural phenomenon to gods. Lightning bolts were were weapons being thrown down by Zeus, as the thunder god, or Thor, or something like that. Or the sun was really Apollo's chariot going across the sky, right? And those types of myths even persisted all the way up into, they're in every religion, every culture, even Christian, Jewish and Christian religion and culture. Tower of Babel, for example, as the an explanation as to why there's languages. That's a myth. right? That's basically, that's something that we know did not happen. It's not true whatsoever, and it was a thing that they made up in order to explain, well, how come people speak different languages across the earth, right? Another one is the rainbow. There's a passage in the Bible that talks about how the rainbow is a promise from God to mankind as to never do another flood. Because he put a huge flood to wipe out mankind, and then that was the rainbow. The rainbow is the new covenant, right? And it's a myth. It's a myth. It doesn't, it's why is there a rainbow, right? People in the ancient past had no idea about like, light refracting through water and shit like that, and color spectrums and all that kind of thing, right? So they made up this explanation in order to, when their kids would ask, "Hey, what is that, Dad? What is that rainbow thing there? What does it do?" It's like they made up some explanation as to what it is, and that's what conspiracy theories are. That's what the Great Replacement conspiracy theory is. It's a made up explanation so that you know, um, so that racists and white supremacists and shit like that can explain these phenomenon that are happening in real life, and then also, make people afraid and make money and recruit. That's also it as well. You ever notice, kind of a side tangent here, if you ever go on, Reddit or something, and you go into some of the conspiracy theory subreddits, there's our conspiracy, which is overrun with Holocaust deniers and shit like that. There's also another one called Conspiracy Commons, which is quickly becoming just as wacky as our conspiracy, right? And there's a few others, especially if you go into anti-vax conspiracy subreddits also. And you ever notice how they always say some shit like they'll always claim like, it's time to stop living in fear. They like to say that a lot as part of their rhetoric, right? But you ever notice that basically all conspiracy theories actually really are ways to make for people to express their fear of something. That's really all conspiracy theories are. You know, they're putting fluoride in the water, right? That's a conspiracy theory that's been around for years, and it was because people were afraid of communists and shit like that. Commies are putting fluoride in the water, you know. Um, Anti-vax conspiracy theories are expressions of fear about science and fear of doctors and fear of disease. You know, they're not going to, I mean, you know, they're not going to experiment on me. How many times have you heard that from anti-vax conspiracy theorists, right? Same fucking thing. The moon landing conspiracy is basically a fear that the government's lying to people, you know, that it's all a big con and that we don't really have control over anything. That's really what all conspiracy theories are, and it's the same thing with with this sort of great replacement horseshit. Exact same fucking thing. They're afraid of what's happening. They're afraid of demographic changes, and they need a way to explain it. And they need a way to explain it in such a way that makes them not afraid. And the way that you make people not afraid is you give them an enemy to fight against. Because if they think it's being caused by somebody, right, then that's easier, like, than having to deal with the reality that there is no cause, right? That's the thing. Like, there is no conspiracy behind lower birth rates among white people in the United States. There is no conspiracy. There is nobody that's in charge of that. There's no method by which you can force people to have fewer children. Just doesn't work. There's no like secret, like, group of Hydra kind of scientists going out in like, undercover and putting like poison in the water, or like poisoning, like, consumer products or whatever with chemicals and shit that'll make your dick shrivel up. None of that stuff exists, right? But if you believe it does, right, then that makes you not afraid anymore. Then that gives you the ability, then you think in your head, hey, all we have to do is rise up and we can stop this. All we have to do is find the people who are responsible, right? and we can stop it. And this is really what white nationalists and white supremacists do with these conspiracy theories. You know, they use it as a recruitment tool. They send these out, and then young kids on the internet read all of this shit. They find it as and oh, it's this is really happening. Oh, and then here's a convenient explanation and how you can do something about it, and it makes you feel less powerless. Right. So that's really all conspiracy theories really are. It's basically the exact same fucking thing as a religion if you really think about it. Right. The exact same thing. So went off on a little bit of a tangent there. Sorry about that. But hey, I think it was, I think it was relevant to the conversation here since we're talking about conspiracy theories. Anyway, here's the thing about all of this stuff, right? Why it's bullshit. Okay, first off, the reason, all right, first off, the reason why white birth rates are low in Western countries has nothing to do with any kind of plan. The biggest reason, the most, prominent reason why white people have fewer children in the United States and in Europe is because of economics, right? When you have more money, you have fewer children. This is the pattern that repeats everywhere, and it's not just in Western, Europe. It's not just in Europe. It's not just the United States and Australia. It's not just white people. It's anybody who has money has less children. And that's one of the big reasons why Japan has like such a is going to have such a problem with its population decline because Japanese people have way more money than other Asian countries around there than like say for example people in Cambodia or Laos or fucking Vietnam or something like that, right? Japan is a much more industrialized nation, right, than any of those other places. And people have way more money. They have careers. They have jobs. They actually work too hard in Japan. If you fucking you know if you ask me, like Japanese men and women and shit will work for fucking like 16 hours a day, like every fucking day. It's nuts. Right? If you ever read about salarymen in Japan, it's fucking crazy. They like 12-hour days are like normal, right? Um, and so people have careers. They have less children. They have less time for children. And not just that, but, it also really has to do with education as well. So when women in particular have, the more education, like the higher education a woman has, the less likely she is to have children at a young age, right? So they have less children, they have them later on. And the reason why is because, she's got a career, she's got other shit to deal with, right? She's out there, her existence isn't at this point just focused around just having staying home as a, stay-at-home mom and just having kids. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course. There's millions and millions of women out there who choose to do that, right? Which is great. Do what, you do what you want to do. That's the whole definition of freedom there is doing what you want. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. Go for it, right? But there are also millions and millions of women out there who don't want to just have their entire lives defined by their children. They would like to have careers, they would like to accomplish shit, they want to make money. And then there's also people who can't afford to have children. That's the other side of this, right? So this is kind of a big problem in the United States too. It's expensive to have kids, right? So you have people that, basically like when you have two income families, which the majority of families in the United States are, they're two income families. That means both parents have to work. Then you have less time to actually have children, right? It's expensive to have a child. You have to go to the doctor. You have to like go to the hospital. It can cost like $20,000 to like, birth a child. And then you have all the medicine and health insurance and all this other shit. And a lot of people choose to not have children especially in the United States because they can't afford all this because we don't have any of the social programs that other places do. For example, in Europe, you know, they'll have you know, months of family leave when your child is born. We don't have any of that shit. I just did a video not that long ago where people were making fun of Pete Buttigieg for taking off paternal leave for his kid. And it's like, well, we're like the only fucking country on earth that doesn't have that shit. Every other country on earth, it's like you have a kid, you can take some time off, be with them. Not in the United States, right? So, do you want people to have more kids? Then we need programs like that. We need to make it cheaper. We need to make it affordable so people can have them. You need to subsidize, medical care and have like paternity leave and all that stuff. But that's kind of, getting off on a tangent there. That doesn't really relate that much to this, but anyway, so yeah, there's lots of reasons, but those are the main reasons. The main reasons are because we make more money in the United States, women are more educated, in these countries, in the United States, in Europe, and Japan, stuff like that. And that's why birth rates are not as high. Well, the thing is that, immigrants tend to have more children because they come over, right? And the thing is, for maybe the first generation, they have more kids than the average, right? As they acclimate to the society, their birth rates go align closer to the country that they've immigrated to. So the first generation will have more kids, right? Because they, um, have less money, stuff like that, right? And the woman will usually stay home and take care of the kids, shit like that. But the second and the third generation immigrants will, at this point they're not immigrants anymore, but the second and the third generation, their birth rates stabilize, and because they're making more money. They're making more money. They're getting more education, stuff like that. They have careers, etc. And it's like the same pressures that are affecting the native white population affects them as well. So that's why it's not, it's kind of bullshit, right? Um, and it's really due to more immigrant. It's not due to the immigrants who come and then have a ton of kids. It's due to more immigrants coming every year, which is why immigrant populations are growing in these countries versus, that's is why we have the demographic shifts that are happening, right? Um, but anyway, moving on here. But it is true. It is true that we're seeing this sort of demographic shift, right? But not really. It's not anywhere close to what you could call a genocide, right? At all. The word genocide kind of um, creates an image in your mind of people being dragged out into the street and shot, stuff like that, right? Being put into like train cars and then gassed, that kind of thing. Systematic slaughter. There's nothing like that happening anywhere in the world to white people. So that's kind of bullshit as well, right? Nor are white people being replaced, right? So one thing that you'll see spread around a lot, like they'll cite the fact that there was a drop in people who self-identified as white only in the census between 2010 to 2020, right? And that's true, okay? Because in 2010, um, there were 223 million people in the United States who identified as white only, right, as their racial, ethnic makeup. And in 2020, there were 204. Like they said, white alone, not white only, but white alone is what they say in the census. There were 204 white alone people who identified as white alone. So if you were to see that, you would say, oh, there's a huge drop. That means there's 20 million less white people in the country. That's not what happened. All right. What happened is that there are um, different questions in the 2020 census versus the 2010 census. In particular, they added a group that said it was white with another group, which wasn't there in the 2010, census, right? So basically, in 2020, you had a different option. You could say, are you multiracial? and you could just put white with another group, right? So there's also the another question where it said white Hispanic, right? Because that's a thing too, right? There are, you know, millions and millions upon white people who live in South America and in Mexico and all that who would be considered Hispanic, right? But they're ethnically white. Their race is white, you know, right? And before, also in the past in the United States, we didn't really make that distinction in you know, prior censuses. There was really no distinction, and now you have that too. So people could put, you know, white Hispanic, right? And then they would say white non-Hispanic before. So now it's like you would say white with another group, and then white only, and then white Hispanic, whatever, right? And so more people are answering these questions. So basically, what's going on is there's higher detail in the 2020 census, right? And that resulted in less people saying white only, answering that as their race. Well, so the alt-right and the white supremacist people take that information and, you know, they don't of course do any nuance deep digging in it and say, "Hey, the number of white people decreased. It's a genocide by 20 million over 10 years." It's like that's bullshit at all. That's complete bullshit. It's not like 20 million people fucking died in 10 years, right? Not even close to being true. So, the thing is that all of every race went up, right? Between 2010 and 2020, all of them. The number of, you know, black people and Asians and everybody else. The people with the highest fertility rate, you know, the highest increase from 2010 to 2020, surprisingly, was Pacific Islander is the one that went up the most. Those in the United States right now, people of Pacific Island, you know, they have the highest birth rates right now in the United States. So higher than black people, higher than Hispanics, higher than white people, right? Um, Asians actually have the lowest birth rate in the United States at this moment, right? So for white people, it's somewhere around, I got it right here. It's around 1.76 for white people in the United States right now. So it's like, that's the thing. They're not even, you know, it's not even like white people in the United States have the lowest birth rate. They're not, you know, if you actually believed in this conspiracy theory, then you would have to, looking at the actual facts, you would have to conclude that really the people who are the victims of this would be Asian people. Right? So it's like it's not even like the shit they're saying doesn't even fit the conspiracy that they fucking created, you know. It's because it's all bullshit. That's the reason why. It's because it's bullshit, you know, because the reason why Asians have lower birth rates is because they're highly educated and they make more money in the United States. That's why. And women choose to have you know, when women have careers and shit like that in college degrees, they choose to have less children. And it's like that's kind of a, you know, there's no like nefarious like dealings involved with it at all. You know what I mean? So, anyway, let's see. But you got to think about, you know, why? Like, even if you did believe this kind of thing, if you actually did think that there was a systematic, you know, effort on the part of the ruling elite to reduce white birth rates, why would they want to do it? what what would be the point of exterminating one race? Like if you first off, if you really thought that, you know, there was such a thing as, you know, the Illuminati or something like that, why would they go about such a half-assed way of exterminating a race? Right. Why wouldn't they just do something like, I don't know, you know, kill people, right? Right? Like why wouldn't they just like do it directly instead of like going, because this is kind of, you know, this is the long term plan, you know, this way it'll take like 300 years and shit, you know, if you actually believed it, which in real life it wouldn't happen at all, because it's like, you know, the white people in this country won't even be a minority until like 2050, and then at that point they're not even a minority, they're like 50%, so there's still a plurality, That means they're 50% and everybody else is grouped into the rest of the 50%. So they're still the majority. It's just a plurality. They're not like 87.9% anymore at that point, right? And they won't be a minority for several decades after that. And then even when they do become a minority, like later at like, the year 2100 or some shit, like it's not like their number of their white population is going to crater to fucking zero. It's still going to be like 300 million. So, you know, kind of doesn't make any fucking sense if you just think about it for like half a second. Like all conspiracy theories. If you just do the slightest bit of examination on it, it completely fucking falls apart. And it's, the thing to remember is because it's not about the actual truth. Any conspiracy theories at all are not about the actual truth. They're all just there to scare people and recruit people and to make money. Get people to buy your books and listen to your dumbass podcasts and shit like that. That's really that's really all conspiracy theories are for. Um, this, of course, is not a new conspiracy theory at all. Um, it's been around in one form or another for literally hundreds of years at this point. There is for example, a variation of the white, genocide, Great Replacement conspiracy called Eurabia, and this was, the conspiracy that Islamic immigrants are coming to Europe in mass on purpose as part of some kind of long-term depopulation plan, and the idea is that eventually they're, because of white birth rates and all that shit, they're just going to like be able to outvote everybody, you know, and all the Islamic people will just outvote all the fucking Christian white people, and then implement like Sharia law and stuff in Europe. And before you know it, Europe will be just like a caliphate of Islam or something, right? That's uh, that's been around for quite a while. There's a variation of this in the United States called the Aslan Conspiracy, if you've ever heard of this. And instead of Islamic people, it's Latinos, and the conspiracy goes like this: is that all of these Latinos and stuff like that are coming into the United States on purpose so that they can take back ancestral lands that were lost to them in previous wars with the United States, right? That being these lands being places like New Mexico, parts of Texas, and Southern California, Arizona, shit like that, right? Basically, the parts that Mexico lost in the war of the Mexican War, whenever the fuck that was. I can't remember, 1800s at some point. I can't remember exactly the dates or the Mexican War, but I'm sure, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. That's the conspiracy theory. The conspiracy theory is that, they're just going to come here, they're going to have a shitload of children, they're going to take back these states that Mexico lost, and then at some point when they're the majority, they're going to vote to secede from the United States and join up back with Mexico. Uh, which is completely ridiculous and has no fucking basis in reality. It doesn't matter if, for example, every person in, say, let's say California, let's say every single person in California voted to secede from the United States, that still would not mean California would secede from the United States. It would not. It is illegal to secede from the United States. A state cannot do that, you know. Fought a war over that shit. Right? So it doesn't fucking matter if everybody votes for it. There's certain things that it's just this is never gonna happen. It's got no basis in fucking reality. Dumb as hell. Another variation of this Great Replacement thing is the Yellow Peril. This goes back to the late 19th century. This was coined by actually Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. He was the Kaiser, before fucking Adolf Hitler, right? Back then. And it was to refer to mass immigration from China and Japan and other East Asian countries into Europe. And the idea was that these Asian immigrants would act as a fifth column so that when China wanted to make its move, it would then like invade Europe. Right? That was the plan. And then these recent immigrants would like kind of, fight from the inside. And so that China could take over Europe and create a new sort of modern Chinese empire. Right? Kind of sad. And that's the thing about it, right? It's another thing to remember is that, you know, I mean, first off, right? First off, anti-Chinese bigotry at this point, like, the late, um, 19th century and stuff like that, mainly focused on how they could outcompete white people, right? That the Chinese people were smaller and didn't eat as much, so they didn't require as much food, right? This is true shit. And so you would see stuff like, a good source for this, read People's History of the United States by what the fuck was that guy's name? Was it Howard Zinn or who wrote that book? Now I gotta look that up. Hang on a second. Or was it right, a People's History of the United States? Noam Chomsky. That's who that. No, it was Howard Zinn. Yeah, People's History of the United States. Right. Um, which is talks a lot about this, about how in the late 19th century, early 20th centuries there were anti-immigration laws targeting Asians and stuff like that. Excuse me. And the bigotry around that was that Asian people would outcompete white people, that they would steal their jobs and they would drive down wages. And it's the exact same shit you hear today. Right? The exact same stuff that you hear today where they talk about, immigration from south of the border. Just it was so it kind of really goes to show like all these conspiracy theories and stuff like that. It really goes to show that first off, these people have no imaginations, right? They just recycle the same fucking dumbass conspiracy theory horseshit over and over and over again, right? And secondly, it goes to show that bigotry is all the same. It's the same. They're saying the same shit now against Latino immigrants and stuff that they said against Asian immigrants 100 years ago, and they said the same thing about Irish immigrants before that, and so on and so forth. They're always simultaneously extremely lazy, do for nothings that will just suck off the public teat and work too hard and will steal your job and shit. They're both at the same time. And I don't know how that fucking works. It's like, how can you be lazy and take my job? Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense. And it never does. It never does make any sense. If you actually think about it, all of these things always fall apart. And that's because people who believe in conspiracy theories don't actually think because they're not really that smart. They're not looking for the actual truth. They're looking for shit that makes them feel good. Mm. And that's what you got to remember when it comes to conspiracy theorists. You know, they don't really care. They just want shit that like, they don't really care what the actual truth is. They're just looking for things that align with their preconceived, prejudices and biases and assures them, makes them feel comfortable about their place in the world, like myths, like religions. The exact same thing. Let's see. What color should we make this dragon's hair? Usually they're white, aren't they? When you look at Asian dragons, they usually either have red hair or white hair or something like that. Right, hang on. Asian dragon. Wow. I type in Asian, lots of bad things come up. I really need to clean out my search history here. Okay. Anyway, oh, red. Okay, so it's either red or I'm seeing lots of red hair on Asian dragons. All right. I don't know. Red and blue doesn't look right to me. I think we'll make it more of a silvery kind of thing. See, we got some new guys in the chat. Cephas, thanks for joining, man. Adversary Fandon 2, thank you for joining. And James Brooks, thank you for joining also. Appreciate it, guys. Anyway, so here's another thing before we move off of this. You know, is the idea that the latest kind of variation on this that you're seeing. This is something Tucker Carlson has brought up as well. This idea that Democrats, specifically in the United States, are encouraging immigration, illegal or legal or illegal otherwise, and are specifically bringing these people in so that they will vote Democrat, and then that way the Democrats can win future elections. That's the plan, right? And it's like, this wacky shit like this, it's easy to ignore until you see the mainstream right wing people talking about it. This is Tucker Carlson brought this up on his show. Guy gets like 20 million viewers a fucking night. It's ridiculous. So, um, the thing about that, right, and another variation of this as well is that, they're coming here to basically live off the public dole, to live off of our welfare and shit like that, right? So when it comes to the voting thing, and actually also the welfare thing, right, you don't get these, like, you can't vote and you can't get welfare if you're not a citizen of the United States, right? So you don't just come over and then suddenly you're a citizen, suddenly you can vote, and suddenly you can take social services and shit like that. It takes a hell of a long time for someone to immigrate to the United States. It's extremely difficult and broken, the process, on purpose, right? Republicans have made that process broken on purpose because they don't want people immigrating. And it can take decades at some point, you know, up to 22, 23, 24 years for someone beginning the immigration process to actually go from, immigrating and then coming here and going through all the tests and all that shit and getting, going on all the waiting lists and everything. So it can literally take decades for some people. And there's some people that get pushed ahead in the line than others, right? There are other programs for things for people like, for example, DACA, stuff like that. There's those types of programs out there. But in general, it's not a quick process. So you got to think, it's like, well, if it was real, if Democrats really were trying to steal elections by importing people from other countries, like, what fucking election are they going to steal? They going to steal the 2040 election? Is that what it is? Like, I guess they're just thinking long term, right? They're not thinking about 4 years from now. They're thinking about 40 years from now, right? That's the first thing. Second thing, how do you know that all of these people are going to vote Democrat? I'm sure there's plenty of conservatives that come from, other countries as well, right? The thing is that when it comes to, like, say, for Latinos, for example, Latinos are highly, highly, as a demographic, right? As a demographic group. I mean, you can't say any individual person, obviously. But as a demographic, they're highly religious, you know, extremely religious, Catholics and shit like that, right? I mean, Mexico, Guatemala, Colombia, these are Catholic countries, right? We're like fucking, and when I say Catholic countries, it means like 99% of the people that live in these countries are Catholic. Or the people that live in these places are Catholic, right? So it's like, you know, they're extremely conservative when it comes to things like gender roles, abortion, right? Um, Sex before marriage, shit like that, right? They would make natural allies for the right wing in this country, and this is why you've seen in the past, you've seen Republicans try to reach out to Latinos, for example, trying to recruit them. Like Mitt Romney, for example, went on TV once and got this incredibly bad, because he can speak Spanish, because Mitt Romney's family is actually from Mexico. Um, Yeah, I know, huh? And he can speak fluent Spanish, and he went on Telemundo and like had this incredibly bad like um body tan spray on tan, and it was to make him look more Latino, right? That's what it was. It was this incredibly awful, cringy ass like attempt to make him look like so that he would relate to like Latinos, and they said, oh, we need to make his skin darker, and it was like he had this like fucking orange clown speaking Spanish with this like incredibly bad American accent. I mean, yeah, okay, he could speak it better than I can, but still, dude, he's like, fucking, you got to work on your accent, buddy, right? And pandering to these people. So there was attempts in the past. Of course, all that shit went out the window with Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump kind of ran on the idea of they're sending rapists and murderers here. I mean, I'm sure some of them were good people, right? Mm. So yeah, it's kind of this conspiracy. It just has no legs like anything else. I mean, people from, for example, Middle Eastern immigrants are incredibly conservative, right? I mean, they believe in essentially all the same shit that like conservative Christians believe as well. They're anti-abortion, right? They're anti-LGBTQ. They're very pro gender roles to the point, of traditional gender roles to the point where women are like, not allowed to drive cars and shit in places like Saudi Arabia, right? So you would think they would make natural allies with the far right wing in these countries, but right wingers and they can't get over the race issue, right? And so that's why they assume they're all going to vote Democrat. It's like it doesn't make any fucking sense. Um, and that's the other thing too. Is like when it comes to the welfare thing, like you can't get welfare if you're not a citizen. So how, and then also in the United States, for example, like you can't live off of welfare. Like it's not possible, So first off, you don't get it. Secondly, even if you could, it's not enough money to just survive forever. Like, no, you don't, go talk to somebody who lives on welfare, who lives on, these types of programs, SNAP, shit like that, disability. It's like barely subsistence level, like survival, right? Like, so if you were gonna do that, if your plan was to go to a Western country, like let's say you're from, I don't know, someplace in South America or some shit, and you say to yourself, I'm just lazy, I don't want to work anymore. I want to go immigrate to a rich Western country and just get free checks from the government. That's my plan. Why would you come to the United States? The United States doesn't have any of that shit. There's no universal health care here, right? You know, none at all, zero. So you're gonna be paying up the ass for your health care, right? Not getting that from the government. There's no UBI programs here, right? Other countries do have these things, right? Pretty much all of Europe, all of, fucking Canada, right? Japan, stuff like that, have universal healthcare, right? The healthcare systems in Mexico and Cuba are like better than what we have in the United States here. They have more doctors, it's cheaper, right? There are programs there to help people from going into medical debt, that kind of thing. We don't have shit in the United States. We have our version of healthcare is buy fucking healthcare. And here's like a website set up by the government. And oh, it used to be good healthcare, but then the Republicans took that away. So now you can spend money on shitty healthcare that won't help you. So go buy it. That's our fucking version of universal healthcare. So that's not gonna fucking help you. You know, you don't get any money from the government. Like there are countries out there that have forms of UBI. Australia, Finland, France. You know, fucking Iran has UBI, right? People in Iran get money from the government, like a check, right? I mean, it's not very much, but you know, we don't have shit like that. I mean, the closest in the United States is actually in Alaska, and Alaska has a form of UBI where people get a few $1,000s a year because of like oil money, that kind of thing, right? So that doesn't hold any water either. If that was your goal, was to do that, the United States is not the place to go do that. You know, the reason why people come to the United States is to get jobs because we need labor because there's millions and millions of people that live here and they need, goods and services, and you in the United States working at a car wash will make more money than being a college professor in like, Argentina or something, right? So, yeah, like, you know, um, the company I currently work for, well, I don't want to talk about that. All right, I was gonna say some shit, but yeah, let's not talk about that at all. I'm not gonna talk about that. But still, I know. Let's just say I know for a fact that people down there, who are paid what would be considered lower wages in the United States, but the country they live in, that's actually a very high wage. So it's like, you know, if you had that ability, right? If you could, for example, make more money in another country working in a restaurant or something than you could being a college educated professional in this country, you would go because that's where the fucking money is. That's where people go. People go where the jobs and where the opportunity is. Um, so yeah, that's all bullshit, right? Doesn't make any fucking sense. Um, where are we? Okay, so I do want to talk about one thing. That's all right. So that was the big, the great replacement, the white genocide, all that stuff. You know, zero truth to any of that shit whatsoever. But if you believed these things, right? If you believed somebody was actually in control of all of this stuff and was manipulating birth rates and fertility rates and you know immigration policy and all that, right, for nefarious reasons in order to wipe out your race, you'd have to start thinking, well, who is actually doing that? You know, there has to be someone responsible, right? If this is what you believe, then who's the perpetrator of the conspiracy, right? And it is, of course, according to the alt-right, Jewish people. And you'll see lots of, variations on this. It's basically the international Jewish conspiracy, is what it essentially is, right? And whenever you hear people talking about, things like Zionists or international bankers or globalists or the New World Order, the Illuminati, shit like that. This is all variations on the international Jewish conspiracy, right? The idea that there's this Jewish cabal of you know powerful, rich, influential people that run corporations, that run banks, that have their fingers in the governments around the world and are manipulating policies in such a way that they just control everything. They control all the purse strings everywhere, all the spending, and you know, cause all of the wars and economic meltdowns and stuff like that, right? And their end goal, of course, is nothing less than total world domination, right? Um, and of course, for some reason, in order to dominate the world, they have to kill all the white people. I don't know how that works. I don't know why white supremacists and white nationalists and shit like that think that they have to be the arch enemy of Jewish people, but that's just kind of how the conspiracy theories have evolved over the centuries, right? So another term that you'll hear about these people throw around is Zog, um, which stands for Zionist Occupied Government. That's a thing that goes back to at least the 80s. I think it was coined by the guy that founded the Aryan Nations, I think, right? And you'll hear people like David Duke and shit say Zog all the time. So that's kind of a term that's been adopted by the alt right as well, you know. Um, but yeah, refuting, but anytime you hear people talking about like, the international monetary moneyed elite, uh, or cultural Marxism, right? Or, the cultural elite or anything like that, the 1%, right? That's who you would usually call the 1%. They're usually talking about Jews, right? But it all depends, because there are even people who are not in the alt-right that believe this shit and will try to not emphasize the you know, anti-Semitic parts of it, you know, because there actually is a 1%, obviously, right? It's just they're not a cabal of Jewish bankers. They're just bankers, right? They're people like Jeff Bezos and you know, fucking the Microsoft guy, Bill Gates. Those people, the rich and the powerful. It's got nothing to do with their fucking religion, right? It has to do with their fucking bank accounts, right? Jeff Bezos isn't Jewish, right? So, you know, fucking Bill Gates isn't Jewish, right? Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, they're not Jewish. Fucking Donald Trump isn't Jewish. These are all super rich and powerful fucking people that run things. These are the real people, the real 1%, you know, are the heads of CEOs and of corporations and presidents and shit like that. Obama's part of the 1%, right? It's true. He is. He's a super rich guy that's, you know, he didn't used to be. I guess, apparently he became a millionaire after he was president by book sales and shit. But he's part of the fucking moneyed elite, hedge fund managers, shit like that. It's those are the people who are the actual 1%. There's no like hidden group of cabal of people that meet in a floating hovering fortress and shit, orbiting over the earth or whatever in dark robes, right? Manipulating stock prices and deciding which Harry Potter movie is going to get made, that kind of thing. That doesn't fucking exist. But there is such a thing as the 1%. They're just the fucking rich people that don't pay any taxes and own all the politicians because they can spend, you know, fucking $1 million every election and shit to make sure that the shit they want to get passed gets passed. And that's why we have things like, for example, a 1.5 trillion-dollar infrastructure bill, which does bullshit like privatize roads and put in toll roads and that kind of thing. Whereas the other bill, the Build Back Better plan, is basically fucking dead. The bill that had all the shit that was going to help people, you know, the bill that had the provisions for like education and like that kind of thing and childcare, all that stuff, all that's been fucking 86 because rich people don't want to pay taxes to pay for it. That's why. So once again, it's a myth. It's a myth that people use to explain why everything is fucked up and why we can't get any like actual progress to happen in this country. And it must be because of the evil globalist bankers who are also Jewish for some reason. It's like I guess you just can't be. I guess just being rich isn't good enough. You know, you also have to throw some anti-Semitism in there too. Um, but this is really literally a conspiracy theory that has been around for centuries. This is very much not a new thing. Um, back in the Middle Ages, they had, there was a conspiracy called blood libel, right? And this was the idea that Jewish people were kidnapping Christian children and, you know, basically sacrificing them and draining their blood and then using their blood in rituals where they would like bake their matzah balls and that kind of thing for Passover. Right. This is like literally something like, we're talking Middle Ages here. So it's not like, anti-Semitism is a new thing, right? And this is part of that kind of reason, right? For this type of anti-Semitism is part of the reason why Jewish people were persecuted so much throughout the Middle Ages. And they were, there would be occasional pogroms and exiles and that kind of thing, forced deportations and stuff like that, and murders. You know, um, Jewish people were very much second class citizens all throughout the Middle Ages in Europe, that kind of thing. Um, yeah, maybe we should make his hair green. I don't know. What do you think? Silver or green? Yeah, you know what? Let's go with silver for now. But you know what? I'm gonna make his whiskers here green. We'll do that. We can always change that later. Anyway, and it was also during this time in the Middle Ages where the stereotype of Jewish people as greedy, sort of money hungry, unscrupulous, like untrustworthy misers came from, right? The reason for that is because the Bible says you are not allowed to charge interest on loans, right? So Christian people in Europe were not money lenders because the way you make money through lending out money is to charge interest. Well, there are multiple passages in the Bible that say you are not allowed to charge interest to people, right? When you loan them money. You're supposed to loan money out to people in order to help them, not to profit from them. That's essentially the message that the Bible gives, right? So the only people who would loan money would be Jewish people, and there were actually in some countries in Europe laws specifically set aside that exempted, you know, they would call it usury, right? The practice of loaning money at interest was called usury in the Middle Ages. And there were laws set aside specifically for Jewish people to do that. Well, people don't like that, you know, this idea that they get to do some shit that we don't, right? And because the Bible says not to do it, so the only people who would do it would be, apparently if you're going against the word of the Bible, then you must be like a fucking, you must be like a evil, unscrupulous person. And so that was where this idea of, Jewish people as untrustworthy, greedy, that's where that came from, right? And it's also the reason why Jewish people became bankers, because that was their sort of only industry that they were allowed to really engage in was to lend money, right? Because they weren't allowed to do anything else, right? They were all sort of discriminated against and shit like that. Like in many countries in Europe, Jewish people were not allowed to own land, you know. And for example, in England, every Jewish person in medieval England was property of the king, you know. So, this was an era when people didn't, human rights didn't exist during this point, right? Jewish people were property at this point, like in England of the king, and the king could tax them differently, for example. He could basically kill them anytime he felt like it. They were essentially slaves, right? And so, yeah, that's where this when banking became a thing in the 17th and or sorry, 18th and 19th centuries, right? You saw Jewish people kind of just sort of pioneered that industry, right? And that's why there's a lot of Jewish bankers today. But it's got nothing to do with any kind of fucking conspiracy theory, right? That's just that's how history unfolded itself, you know. But anyway, this this stereotype is even still around today, very much around today. The stereotype of Jewish people as greedy, money hungry, like um, sell you out, shit like that, right? The whole like stab in the back myth, stuff like that. That's where all this shit comes from, you know, from basically centuries of bigotry, right? Then we get into the 19th century, a very big influence on anti-Semitism was this, and especially this conspiracy of the Jewish sort of overlord, conspiracy, right? was a pamphlet that was put out that was published in 1903 called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, right? I kind of have an entire stream dedicated to that. Well, not an entire stream, but I've gone over it before, so I won't spend too much time talking about this. But it's essentially, a manual um, about how to, it kind of like claims to sort of be like yeah, basically a manual of and manifesto for a secret society of Jewish people, Jewish elites that control everything, and talks about their like their plans to take over and blah 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 and all this other shit, right? And this was debunked as early as 1921, so it's even back then they knew this was bullshit, right? But it's kind of one of those things like I said before, bad ideas never die, right? And even so, very powerful and influential people bought into this horse shit. Among them was Henry Ford, who really, really, really didn't like Jewish people. Uh, Henry Ford published articles on the protocols of elders of Zion and other anti Semitic stuff in his newspaper, because Henry Ford, of course, had his own newspaper, right? And these were compiled into a book that he gathered all these articles together and compiled them into a book called The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem. Um, Another person who was, highly influenced by Henry Ford was none other than Adolf Hitler, because apparently Henry Ford even provided some of the financing for the early Nazi Party. Apparently, that's actually a thing that actually happened. And Adolf Hitler himself referenced the Protocols of the Elder of Zion in Mein Kampf. So, kind of goes to show, bad ideas get around and lead to actual people dying, you know. That's why it's so important, when people talk about culture war and shit like that. That's why it's so important to fight back. That's why it's so important to have for there to be alternative voices so that, you know, and to try to not radicalize people, and to try to do things to de-radicalize people is what I meant to say. Sorry, right? Is because ideas have a way of, especially like racist ideas, bigotry it has a way of perpetrating tragedy, right? And the real cost of unchecked racism and unchecked bigotry is human lives, right? Death. So, just think if somebody would have been there in Germany in like 1933 with you know, an alternate vision there, right? Just think if the anti-fascists at that point, because there were anti-fascists in Germany in 1933, if they just would have been a little bit stronger, if they would have fought back a little bit more and prevented the Nazis from taking power, we'd be living in a much different world today, right? Um, Anyway, so the most popular form of this kind of conspiracy, the Jews run everything, international Jewry kind of conspiracy that you see nowadays in just, American conspiracy theory culture, right? I guess is what you would call it. As far as I think, the most popular would be probably the New World Order conspiracy, right? The NWO, that kind of thing. I'm sure you've probably heard that before, right? It's sort of at this point become cliche. So many people talking about the New World Order. Um, but there are people that still actually believe this shit, so we got to talk about it. And it is the New World Order wasn't coined by George W. Bush, or not George W. Bush, but George Bush Sr. Wasn't coined by him, but it was popularized by him and kind of brought into the mainstream because he mentioned the term in a few of his speeches in relation to the end of the Cold War. You know, essentially Bush's speeches were him talking about how the Cold War's over, there's going to be a new world order, and instead of competing with the Russians, we're going to work together with the Russians, you know, and we're not going to worry about, there's not going to be a nuclear war and all that other shit. We're not going to kill each other. We're going to cooperate in the spirit of, brotherhood and blah, 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 and all that shit. Yeah, that didn't work out very well, did it? Right? But anyway, so conspiracies being people being who they are kind of latched on to that. George Bush Sr. was very much at the time, a central figure in New World Order conspiracies, right? So what exactly is the World Order conspiracy? It's the idea that the leading elites, powerful elites, right, which of course are the Jewish elites, are going to manipulate world events in such a way to where it results in a one world government being formed. So the main thing for the New World Order conspiracy is that this shadowy group somewhere, the Illuminati or the Bilderbergs or wherever the fuck they are working towards eliminating borders and destroying national sovereignty so that the entire earth will be run by one government, right? And within this conspiracy is literally every other conspiracy that you can possibly imagine. All of it. Every conspiracy that everywhere. Chemtrails, fluoride in the water, the fake moon landing, mind control, microchips and vaccines, right? Fucking making the frogs gay, right? UFOs, Satan, the Antichrist, the fucking second coming. All of this stuff has been woven into the New World Order conspiracy theory, right? And it is essentially, at this point, the New World Order conspiracy is basically modern retelling of biblical end time prophecy. That's what it is, right? It wasn't always like that. When I first heard about it, I was in high school back in the 90s, early 90s, and it was very much at that point more of a, the commies are coming kind of conspiracy, that they're coming, they're going to take away, our ability to, we won't be able to vote anymore, and we'll all be living in a worldwide version of, you know, Soviet Russia or whatever. That was the main concern when I first heard about it. And over the last 20, 30 years, it's really pretty much turned into biblical end time prophecy, right? And the idea being that at this point, the Antichrist is going to come, create the one world government, and then they're going to set up a one like universal religion that everyone will have to obey, right? And if you don't, you get killed, right? And then that's where the mark of the beast is going to come in, and microchips and vaccines, of course, are going to be the mark of the beast, right? This is why all the COVID anti-vaxxers are having such a fucking field day nowadays because they think the shit's actually happening, right? And then this will, of course, lead to the second coming. This will lead to Jesus Christ coming back and killing all of these people. And there is very much a component of that, of this sort of this retribution against all of your enemies. You know, this you see this a lot in QAnon actually now. Like QAnon is kind of taking this stuff over as well. So there's a big component of QAnon where they sort of the people that believe it kind of can't wait to start murdering people. They're waiting for the boogaloo to happen, right? They want to you know they want to start actually using all the guns and the ammo that they've been stocking up for all these years and that kind of thing, right? And it's another variation on of the NWO. It's another variation of biblical end time prophecy is basically what it is. You know, just another example of how conspiracy theorists do not have any new ideas. It's all recycled bullshit that we've seen before many times in the past, right? It's basically the same shit that just keeps getting recycled over and over, and it's just a new villain of the week, you know. At some point, it was um, Islamic terrorism that was going to do all this, and then before that, it was like the Russians or whatever, and the Soviet Union, that kind of thing, right? And now it's Democrats and AOC, AOC and all that, and LGBTQ people that are like, destroying Western civilization, and these are the people that we need to fight back against. Blah 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 blah. It's all bullshit, folks. Right? Um. Anyway, another big thing about the NWO is bloodlines. They always talk about bloodlines. They always talk about how and that's where that's kind of a stand-in for anti-Semitism at that point. It's all like the ruling elite. So whenever you hear that, you hear them talking about how like you know, um, all of the world's presidents and CEOs and things are all related, right? That's basically anti-Semitism at that point, right? Because then the next step is then they're all controlled by Jews, and it really doesn't matter what particular group they're talking about, right? It's because all of them, basically everything that you can think of, has been woven into this mythology. The World Bank and the IMF and NATO, and the Trilateral Commission. These are all things that really exist, and they do various, they're all various, like, have functions, right? They've all been woven into this tapestry of this mythology, and they're all controlled by, Jewish elites who are dominated by families that are interrelated, right? And then, other wacky groups get added into this too, Freemasons and the Illuminati and the Order of the Golden Dawn and shit like that, right? A big component of the NWO is of course like Satan worship, which is another way of throwing anti-Semitism in there as well, because that's another conspiracy theory about Jewish people, is that they're like been secretly worshiping Satan for centuries. That's another one that goes all the way back to blood libel, right? Um, so yeah, that's the thing about this. It's like it's basically those dipshit like Left Behind books. You ever read any of those by what's the guy's name? Fucking Timothy LaHaye, I think, is the guy that wrote those. He's like Tim LaHaye is like a conservative like preacher. I think he actually used to run a ministry if he doesn't still do it. Wrote all these books about Left Behind, which is the second coming and all that shit, and then they made some really bad movies starring Kirk Cameron with them, like which are just painfully horrible to watch, and they have all the same kind of tropes, people disappearing in the rapture and their clothes stay on Earth and planes crashing and shit because the pilots get raptured, that kind of thing. That's basically the NWO. It's like people read this shit and they actually think it's real. It's like if somebody actually thought that Left Behind was like not fiction and it was like a documentary. That's what this shit is, right? Um, where are we at? 1236. Other things, of course, that Jewish people are responsible for, because they're not just responsible for trying to take over the earth and eliminate the white race, but they are responsible for lots of things. So here's some other things that the Jewish people have been blamed for in the past: communism, fascism, socialism, feminism. I like that. I like that because, some of these things are diametrically opposed to each other. It's like you can't be a fascist and a communist at the same time. That doesn't fucking make any sense, right? Left-wing politics in general have been blamed on Jews, of course, and these are especially things that you still see in the alt-right, people talking about how it's all like uh, you know all leftists in general, especially Democrats, are just dominated by Jews, and we're all just controlled. We're all just mindless brain, brain mind controlled puppets or whatever, right? Late stage capitalism, corporatism, high taxes, of course, the media, that's a big thing that Jewish people are responsible for, you know. That's actually a trope that goes back forever. I mean, even way back, like we said in the stream last week, way back when white supremacists first got on, started using computers back in the Usenet days and that kind of thing, and bulletin boards and stuff. They would pass around enemies lists of Jewish people and corporations and stuff. And you even see that from the alt right today. One that comes to mind was a meme called "Blue the Jew." I don't know if you've ever heard of this. I do a Google for it right now, but it's yeah, I don't want to get that shit in my search history. But Blue the Jew, it was basically people would put out memes of Jewish people that work at corporations like Google or something like that, and then they would Photoshop it so that they were all blue, you know, and so that you would just see this like these pictures of people that why is this guy blue, and oh, because he's Jewish, right? Problem with that is that sometimes these people wouldn't be Jewish at all, so they would just have a guy that had a Jewish last name. Well, it's like if your last name is Cohen or something, that doesn't mean you're automatically Jewish, right? And then they would spread these like memes around and shit, and people would harass them. People would fucking like start threatening them and shit like that. And that's basically what they're basically fucking enemies lists. It's like old habits die hard for these fucking people, right? Other things Jewish people, of course, are responsible for: immigration, job outsourcing, wars, of course. They blame every war on Jewish people. 9/11 was obviously caused by Jewish people, according to the alt-right. I remember reading a conspiracy theory back then, back when 9/11 happened, that people were, because we didn't really have social media in 2001, you know, but there was, things like bulletin boards and forums and you would also get these chain email letters, like chain letters that your fucking grandma gets or whatever. They would be these chain email letters that would be sent around. And there would be claims that, for example, in the Twin Towers on 9/11, all of the people, all of the Jewish people who worked in the Twin Towers on 9/11 called out of work, for example. There were conspiracy theories like that. So they were like, there were no Jews died in 9/11 because they got a warning from who? From Israel, I guess, right? you know, Somebody warned them that they were gonna blow up the towers. So it's like, oh, the who warned them? The Jewish Illuminati. Those are the people who warned them. Such bullshit, folks. But this kind of goes to show that this stuff is alive and well, right? Um, Other things Jewish people get blamed for: abortion, um, which is funny because the alt right usually doesn't care about abortion when it comes to minorities. They want to keep abortion legal so that black people and like Latinos and stuff will get abortions, but they blame the fact that white people get abortions on Jews, right? Um, Economic meltdowns, of course, are all planned. There are no just market forces involved of when the housing market collapses or the banking industry collapses or some shit. Obviously, there's no market forces involved. Obviously, all that stuff is also planned by Jews for some reason. I guess to make what? To make white people lose money, and I don't know. Doesn't make any sense, right? Income disparity, fake news, because the Jews control the media, so they must obviously be creating fake news as well. Gay people, trans people, in fact, just the entire push for sorry, LGBTQ rights. I cannot say that fast. My tongue does not have the required dexterity to say that fast. Um, the entire plan to give, you know, non-straight people white rights is of course a conspiracy by Jews to somehow, I guess, what, encourage people to be gay so that white people don't have children? I don't know. I don't really understand why. I guess it's just to subvert, Western traditional family values or some shit. Who fucking knows? Of course, atheism is also the fault of Jews, which doesn't make any sense either. And you'd think they would want to, I don't know, convert more people to Judaism if that was their goal, but nope, apparently atheism is also the fault of Jewish people, as well as plagues and vaccinations. So there is very much in current anti-vax conspiracy theory, circles out there, very much a heavy undercurrent of anti-Semitism. And the alt-right people, the right wing, the racist people, they're using it as a recruitment tool. They most definitely are, and that's why you're seeing people going to fucking you know, school board meetings and stuff like that, and claiming that this is all a depopulation program and it's the Jews who are doing it to us. It's They're very much taking advantage of anti-vax people, trying to recruit those people, trying to get them on board, stuff like that. You know what we need to do? Instead of erasing all of these little, fuck it, it's kind of too late. I don't want to do that. Fuck it, I'll just do it by hand. I was gonna like put on a filter to get rid of all of these little artifacts, but that would fuck up my line work a little bit more. Um, okay, what time are we at? 12:44. I was gonna go into a big thing about the white ethno states and stuff like that, but maybe we'll save that for next time. One more thing I want to talk about here before we end this, maybe I don't know if I could squeeze this into 15 minutes, is the JQ, the Jewish question, right? So you'll often hear alt-right people, racist people, on 4chan and elsewhere, they'll post, they'll be talking about the JQ, and you go, what the fuck is that? That is the Jewish question, right? The JQ. And usually it'll be framed something like this. It'll just say something like, what do you think of the JQ concerning in particular the media, news outlets, Hollywood, popular culture, banks, and so on? This is just basically another recycling of, the international Jewish conspiracy, right? Um, So the idea of the Jewish question per se is not a new thing as well. This is actually something that came around when in the 19th century when nationalism kind of became a thing, right? Around that time there were a lot of countries were transitioning away in Europe in particular were transitioning away from monarchies to like democracies essentially, right? And you had nationalists who people that wanted to start their own countries and they wanted to you know that kind of thing. And you had what were called these national questions, right? And a national question is basically just a framing device for a way to discuss issues of the day, right? And so there wasn't just only the Jewish question. There were lots of other types of things. There would be the Armenian question. There would be the German question, stuff like that, right? And it didn't always have to do with minorities or, you know, groups of ethnic people either. Like there would be the national defense question, stuff like that. So, and this was actually used a lot. Actually, it was a framing device devised by socialists in the beginning. There was Karl Marx actually wrote a book called The Jewish Question, which was like, um, and when it came to the Jewish question, though, back then, it was just mainly like, what should we do? Should you, when it comes to Jewish people, what should we do? Should we give them full rights? Because you got to remember, because Jewish people were pushed into ghettos and stuff like that, and they were not given They didn't have equal rights back then. This sort of persisted into the, you know, 18th and 19th centuries. So that was a big part of the discussion too. Was like, should Jewish people have the same rights as normal people, as Christians, right? Or whatever, as other citizens? Should they be given citizenship? Can they be citizens? Because there was a big discussion back then that, Jewish people were not just an ethnicity, that they should be a nation, you know, they should have their own nation, that kind of thing, right? Where would their loyalties lie? These are all things that they discussed in the 19th century in Europe, right? When it came to the JQ, the Jewish question, right? One answer to this was the Holocaust. That was the answer to the Jewish question that the Nazis came up with. Another answer was Israel, the modern state of Israel, was another answer to the Jewish question, you know. So, yeah, it's not a thing that the alt-right, of course, invented, but they, of course, have adapted this themselves to their own, uses. And now, basically, when you see somebody talking about the JQ, they're essentially usually just spouting this same, international Jewish conspiracy theory horseshit. What they really are talking about is they want to talk about how, do you think the Jews run everything, right? Do you think that like I said, that quote at the beginning, that what I said with that quote was actually something taken from Reddit. What do you think of the JQ concerning, in particular, the media, news outlets, Hollywood, popular culture, banks, so on? That's actually a quote by a real person, right? So it's really just become kind of a tool to radicalize people, to you know, get them talking about, to spreading anti-Semitism and bigotry and hate. And the answer to the question that the alt-right usually comes up with is either kill them, we need a new Holocaust, or the other answer is we need to, you know, um, basically start our own country, separate out and start a white ethnic homeland, usually in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Um, there were, however, before we end this, I do want to end on one particular note. There are, however, people in the alt-right who are Jewish. Right? Believe it or not. After all of this shit that we just said, talking about the Jewish question and all this other bullshit and anti-Semitism, blah blah blah, and all of that stuff. There are, even to this day, Jewish people who would consider themselves alt-right. And in the beginning, when the alt-right first became a thing in 2008, 2009, all the way up until 2016 or so, some some of the more prominent speakers in the alt-right tried to reach out to like-minded Jewish people. For example, Jared Taylor was one person who actually, you know, has tried to gain allies from the Jewish community, right? Because Jewish people are perfectly capable of being bigots themselves, right? So, gotta remember that just because your religion is one thing doesn't mean you're gonna act in a certain way, right? Um, Jared Taylor runs a magazine, a racist magazine called American Renaissance, and has published articles from Jewish writers. And in a Ask Me Anything post that he had on Reddit, um, he wrote the following: I don't think it's a good idea to drive away political potential allies by declaring war on all Jews. Um, To be sure, there are many elite Jews who work against the interest of whites, but other Jews see themselves as men of the West who will fight to preserve European civilization. Right. So that's the thing to remember, is that the alt-right is not a monolith. They are very much, a very loose group who would just sort of identify in this way. Um, but to say that, it is definitely true that the vast majority of people who fall under the banner of the alt-right online are very much anti-Semitic, and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, anti-Semitic bigotry and hatred is very much a large part of what these people, you know, perpetuate online. You know, spread hatred and stuff, and they use it as basically recruitment tools. You know, all of that kind of, but all of that sort of appealing to Jewish people and appealing, they would also appeal to non-whites. They would also try to, because there are also, like, for example, Proud Boys who are not white, stuff like that, and they would appeal to even people who are in the, LGBTQ community. All of that stuff kind of went away though once Charlottesville happened. There's nothing like having, televised scenes of angry white, you know, chuds running around with tiki torches screaming, Jews will not replace us, to solidify in the public consciousness that, hey, maybe these people don't like Jewish people, right? That kind of ruined the whole thing and all of this outreach, and which is good because it exposed them for fucking who they were. And, now after you see that on TV, people aren't gonna fucking like fall for this bullshit anymore. So, but that's just something to keep in mind because you're gonna run across, and if you choose to engage these people online, you're going to run across people who will claim that it's got nothing to do with anti-Semitism, that it's got nothing to do with racism, stuff like that. And all we want to do is look out for the interests of white people and stuff like that. And it's like, don't fall for that shit. Don't fall for that. It's complete 100% total fucking bullshit. Don't fall for their lies. Something to remember about just racists in general, not just the alt-right people, because not all racists identify as the alt-right, but just racists in general, especially organized groups that try to recruit people that have agendas, is that they're not truthful. They don't debate in good faith, you know. They'll lie at the drop of a hat. They will lie to get an advantage. That's why it's kind of like not worth debating them directly. I don't prefer. I mean, there are people that are really good at that. For example, like Vosh. I don't know if you ever watch Vosh. Like, Vosh will do shit like he'll go and debate white supremacists and just totally fucking destroy them, and it's funny to watch. Um, but that's why I don't do that myself. I don't debate these people directly. Because they're not truthful. They're not actually interested in what the truth is. They're interested in recruiting people to their side. And, debates, I think, act as recruitment tools because debates are not about the actual truth. They're about who performs better. You know what I mean? So unless you're like an expert debater, like Bosch is, I don't think you should do it. But that's just me. Anyway, so just stuff to keep in mind, folks. Just be aware when you see this rhetoric dressed up, because that's another tactic they'll do is, they'll try to dress this all up in non-threatening language and stuff like that. Just be aware of the recruitment tactics and the lies that they try to push, and don't fall for it. And when you see your friends or your family buying into this shit, please talk to them. Talk to them and let them know what's happening and where it comes from, right? Because that's how you fight bad ideas, folks. Kind of to close the bottle, to bottle the ends here. You know, you can't kill ideas, right? Ideas never die, especially bad ideas. The only way that you defeat them is by presenting better alternatives. So that's how you stop fucking racism and radicalization and all that, is by presenting a better alternative. Ah, my hand hurts now. But actually, we made a little bit of progress here. At least we kind of got most of the shit colored in. I had an entire thing here talking about the white ethno state. Maybe we'll save that for next time. It's not enough for its own stream. I'll have to like add some more to it. But anyway, we're at the 2 hour mark. Ah, man, my back hurts too. Let's read some of the comments here. Lewis the Hedgehog. Moon landing deniers are to aerospace engineers what creationists are to evolutionary biologists. For sure. For sure. That's the thing I never understood. The moon landing thing, like I don't fucking get that at all. And I've read a couple of books on that. Like I have this book called Alternative 3 that was like talking about how the moon landing was faked, and then another one by Robert Anton Wilson and some other thing about conspiracy theories. And the moon landing, it's like it doesn't make any like why would you possibly want to believe that it's incapable people are incapable of landing on the moon? You know, doesn't make any sense because another aspect to all of this conspiracy theory shit, especially the NWO conspiracy theory, is that they're supposed to be hiding advanced technology. That's another tentacle of the conspiracy is that especially if you're a person like who believes in UFOs and shit, right? Another tentacle is that, well, they have all this advanced technology that they either got through UFOs or like they just developed it, like, Nazi scientists and shit developed it or something, or like they discovered it in like ancient burial sites, whatever, wherever the fuck it comes from. Supposedly the Illuminati or whatever, right, have access to technology which just is beyond anything that you can comprehend and even up to including things like warp drive and like holograms. Like supposedly there's also another conspiracy theory called god, what the fuck is it called, blue something, god damn it, what's the, yeah, now I gotta look that up. There's a conspiracy theory which basically says that they're going to try to use holograms to fake the second coming. uh fake me just write this coming, and it's called blue something. Um, shit, I can't remember. Project Bluebeam? No, it's not Bluebeam. Anyway, there's basically a conspiracy theory that says they're gonna use like holodeck level type of holograms in order to fake Jesus coming back, and then they're gonna use that as, or else another alternative is that they're gonna fake an alien invasion or something using this technology. And so it always kind of blows me away. It's like, well, if they're supposed to have all of this stuff, all of this Star Trek level stuff, then how come they can't land on the moon? Doesn't make any sense. It's like, I don't know. And maybe maybe we should do a stream on like the moon landing. You know what I mean? That'd be kind of funny because there's a lot going on there too. There's people that claim that there's secret bases on the moon that are either staffed by like aliens or like Nazis or like fucking just, a secret space program or something. They even made a movie called fucking Iron Sky about that, which is like a comedy, which is actually kind of funny if you haven't seen Iron Sky. It's an alternate universe where Sarah Palin becomes president, and there are like secret bases of Nazis that have been living on the moon for 50 years and shit. It's hilarious. um anyway, maybe we should do that in one of our things. Let's see. Cephas, alt-right hasn't been a thing since like 2017. Most people who I actually identify as alt-right are LARPers and feds. Charlottesville most definitely has, put the kibosh on what was the alt-right movement at that time, which is kind of what we covered last week, right? Um, like last week we did a sort of a brief history of the alt-right all the way up until Charlottesville, and it definitely did really kind of throw a monkey into the works there. You know, do you know what Charlottesville did is that it destroyed the illusion that the alt right was just like you know that they weren't dangerous or violent, and it removed that veneer of respectability they had. Because that's what like Jared Taylor and like Richard Spencer were going for. They were trying to like, like I said last week, like they encouraged people to dress like conservatively in like sweaters and shirts and ties and have like neat haircuts and things so that they would look like non-threatening, and it was a way of trying to legitimize um racism. and so that they wouldn't be identified with like white power skinheads and shit like that. And Charlottesville most definitely removed that veneer and kind of exposed them for who they were. So, but the alt-right is not gone. No, they're not gone. They're just underground, hiding and trying to get back their, trying to get back to where they were. They were very much like very powerful at that point, especially right around the time Donald Trump got elected. And I really think it was the election of Donald Trump that brought them out and said, hey, maybe we can do bigger rallies and shit. And that's what led to Charlottesville. But they're still around, man. Very much so. And they're kind of growing now. Like I said, they're latching on to anti vaxxers, right? Um, all throughout, 2019, 2020, George Floyd protests, they were out there fighting back against people, Proud Boys and shit, militia fucking assholes, that kind of thing, going around like beating up protesters, stuff like that. So no, man, they're still very much out there. It's just not as it's their attempt at mainstreaming has been like denied, you know, but they're still definitely a problem. Let's see. Adversary fan and the enemy is simultaneously strong and weak. Yes, that is one of the aspects of fascism there. Um, anyway, guys. Okay, well, we're at 1 o'clock, and I think that's where we're at for today. So, want to thank you guys for joining me so much. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Lewis the Hedgehog. Great to see you as always. And Cephas, great to see you again as well. Thanks, man. Um, also, Adversary Fandin, always good to see you as well. And James Brooks, thank you for joining. Really appreciate it. You guys are great. I couldn't do this without you. I'm about to wrap this up here, but before I go, I gotta give my usual ending speech. So, if you like what I do and you want to support me monetarily, I have an SD shop. Um, Here's my Etsy shop. I'll put it down in a thing. I've been selling like crazy lately because we're getting close to Christmas. Christmas is always nuts. So anyway, if you like what I do and you want to support me and you want to own some of my artwork here, I sell these prints. This is a print that we actually did the artwork for this on the stream, and it can be yours if you know, if you feel like it and you want to help me out here. So please check out my SD shop. I also have if you just want to see my artwork, I have a DeviantArt website here that you can go to where I eventually put up all the stuff that we do in the stream goes here too. You can just download this stuff for free. Here's the pumpkin wizard guy that we did last stream for Halloween. So it's all there on my DeviantArt site. I also have a web comic if you want to see that. This is the Hawanja.com webcomic. It's got ninjas, it's got people getting their heads chopped off, stuff like that. Sword fighting, people getting kicked in the face. So please check out my webcomic there. Um, I do have a Patreon. I only have a couple of patrons, but if you oh, let me put this down in the thing so you guys can go to that if you want to. There you go. I do have a Patreon, so if you want to do a monthly support type thing, I have very very cheap levels here. I have to give a shout out to my friend John. Thank you for being one of my patrons there. Appreciate that. Also so yeah, check me out there if you like what I do and you want to see more of it. And then I also have another YouTube channel called UCD videos where I talk about mainly toys and video games and movies and stuff. Been doing a lot of toy reviews lately. Um, so if you want to see me talk about stuff that's not politics, please join me on UCD videos here. I'll put this down in the chat for you guys as well. So thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Lewis a Hedgehog. Thank you, Cephas. Thank you, Adversary Fandin and James Brooks. Um, one more thing before we call it a day. I will be at the Comic Con special edition on Thanksgiving weekend, so 26th, 27th, and 28th. So there'll be no stream on the 27th. So there'll be a stream next week, but not the week after, not Thanksgiving because I'll be at Comic Con selling stuff. I've actually got a table there in the artist alley, which is awesome. I've been trying to get a table at Comic Con for like literally 15 years at this point. So very happy that they finally, finally managed to get one. So yeah, if you have tickets to that or whatever, I think it's too late to get tickets to it. But if you are happen to be going, I'll be there at table KK24. I think is what it is. Is it 22? I don't know. It's either 22 or 24. But anyway, I'll be there, and for the whole weekend. So come down, hang out with me, buy some stuff, and after that, we'll go back to the streams every week as usual. So, anyway, guys, thank you all so much. Really appreciate this. And I will be back next Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Everybody, take care of yourselves. Adios.